And we're back. Welcome back. We're back. We're sitting here gabbing along, and all of a sudden we're live, so we have to become more official. And welcome everyone to the Astro Imaging channel. Oh, what am I looking the wrong way? I'm getting the high sign from Molly.
Oh no, that was me
relaxing. Okay. Yeah. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel.
What was the comment that Eric made about we have to become more official because we're live?
No, we have to enjoy ourselves. Everyone, this is about enjoyment. This whole hobby is about enjoyment. Once we stop enjoying it, then we have to find something else to do. So everyone out there, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight we have Dan Moomey, who's going to tell us how easy it is to go in the middle of nowhere in some place in Arizona or New Mexico and just throw up an observatory. I mean, it just takes a few days with no power, no water. Did I mention no power? No internet, no nothing, and build it out there in the middle of nowhere just because you have dark skies and the land was cheap. Oh, I'm sorry, not the land was cheap. Yeah, I guess it was cheap. Anyway,
point of order. We have 3 bars LTE. I will have you know concern.
What is it? What is LTE?
4G. I get 5G in some spots.
I think it's long-term evolution. I think that's what LTE stands for.
So I do not know what it stands for.
Getting back to the show, everyone, boys and girls. We know Dan because Dan, before I go into something else, Dan came to the eclipse with Molly because they were going to get skunked wherever they were, and they showed up in Ohio. And I got a picture. I'm going to share my screen. How do you do that now?
Yeah, we had our original plan was to go to Texas. We had plans A through K, I think. We ended up executing plan F or G.
Yeah.
It worked.
So I had tasked my son-in-law with doing this exposure, you know, the various stages of the eclipse. And you had to have an establishment shot as a background for all that. And Dan and his mom photobombed Doug's establishment shot.
Shout out to my mom.
Yeah, so yes, Doug took another picture, so the one he published didn't have you in it. But when I saw that, I go, wait, what happened? Anyway, stop saying.
Yeah, Molly showed me that, and I was like, that's just the best. Thank you so much for that.
Great, yeah.
So anyway, getting back to the show. Dan is going to tell us, and I think Molly's probably going to chime in a little bit since they're both out there setting up this observatory. And it really is a cool thing. It's not something that I would ever attempt because I don't know how to do any of the things you need to do to build an observatory. But it's the kind of thing where we have the opportunity to actually go out and have an observatory in the dark side, and it's something we all really would like to do. And they did it, and Dad's going to present it. And before we move on, what do we have next week? Oh, you have me. I forgot. Yes, I'm going to present next week on how to do HO-RGB images, where you get these big emission nebula that have lots of oxygen, lots of hydrogen in it, and how do you best display them? And I have some processing tips and one hack that might be interesting if we have time. And after that, who do we have? Oh, we have Rod Palmier. He's built his own observatory. He's a brain surgeon, I guess. And he's a very good imager, and he's going to tell us about glorious globular clusters. Oh, I could say that fast. Craig Stocks is going to be on again. We've had him before. Gary Im is going to be on to update his database. If you ever want to find something, get a small image of it, all you have to do is download Gary's database, and it's a big spreadsheet which is all indexed and searchable. It's really a cool thing to have. After that, various club astro imaging special interest groups. Not sure what that is, but that's next. And then George Helios after that on Nina Hocus Focus, which I hear is really a cool thing. After that, we have some open sessions that haven't been filled up. So all of you out there, if you have an idea of something you'd like to present, a hack, a way of processing, please go to the astroimagingchannel.org. There's a little contact sheet. Send us a note. Someone will get back to you, and the odds are we will be on the show. So I think that's all the preliminary business. Dan, going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, I'll just start presenting then. There we go. All right. So is this coming through okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So this is just a pretty video. I love this video. I think it's from the European Space Agency, but it goes all the way around the world. So you can see you've got, the cities and the dark areas. And so we live in Denver, where I am right now, and that's coming up right about now, and right in the middle of it. So this is suboptimal for the hobby, obviously, as we all know. So the question is, what are the ways you could solve this problem? There are a lot of different ways. One of the ways, obviously, are filters, and we'll talk about that, remote host observatories, things like that. But the bulk of the talk will be, well, it's really kind of a mix between a show and tell and a how-to, but maybe perhaps most is a cautionary tale. Although it has all worked out quite well. The video you're watching right now is from the site that we affectionately named Semper Tenebris. It's Latin for always dark. It's 9 acres and it's 10 if you round up. So the 10 is the most appropriate name we could come up with. And that's just straight off the camera, no processing, just right off a DSLR, no filters, nothing. Obviously a little bit of clouds that night, but it happens. So is this for you? Spoiler alert, likely not, but maybe, you never know, right? There's a lot of different ways to solve this problem. This is not a real estate seminar. I'm not going to be telling you how to go wheel and deal and whatnot, but I will go through some of the requirements and trade space you might consider when you're trying to figure out what might be the right site. And without any further ado, I'll just knock into it. So the image you have here on the left, this is the Dark Shark Nebula, 5 hours taken from the site with my Takahashi and a reducer and a 2600 APS-C crop sensor and just a UV-IR cut. So this is, I guess you could call it maybe a prerequisite to Manny Leitz's talk, who's on a few months ago. So I encourage you to go and check out a couple of the other Astro Imaging channel videos that have been on before me. Adventure in Building and Outfitting Operations of a Remote Observatory, that's Manny's talk. And then Nico Carver, who's a friend of mine who I've never met before. He's just the type of guy I feel like we could be good friends. He has lessons learned from building a backyard observatory. That one is actually got kind of some parallels to this talk, but his is right in his backyard. Mine is 12 hours away from where I live. We'll go through the pros and cons of doing this, the 5 W's, and a little bit of general advice. This is what I like to call the family portrait of my telescopes, and they live in Denver, Bortle 78. I have a profession where I tend to move every 2 to 3 years, and I never know where I'm going to be living. So one of the nice things about having a remote host, or a remote site, not remote host, a remote site is that I'll have consistency. I know I'll always be able to get those Bortle 2-3 skies a couple times a year when I go out to it. And even if I am going through all the other things I can do, using filters and trying to buy my next house in the suburbs instead of downtown Denver where I am now, there are still some targets that there's no substitute for a dark sky, right? That Dark Shark Nebula is probably a good example of them. And then visual astronomy, in my humble opinion, is always underwhelming from town. I used to live in Colorado Springs. I've lived in Dayton. I've lived in California, Albuquerque, and every one of these locations, I'm kind of like, visual's not for me, which is kind of what why I got into astrophotography. But since buying this land out here, we put a nice big fat juicy Dobsonian telescope, and it has completely transformed the hobby to me from a visual perspective, because I can finally make use of that kind of aperture, and I can see objects that I didn't know you could see with a telescope with an eyepiece. So obviously, filters work well to a point. You've got the general wideband and the narrowband filters. I know the audience is going to be generally pretty familiar with this, but for anyone who might be uninitiated, there are several different types of filters for different purposes, but the two general types are going to be wideband and narrowband. The widebands will accept generally all of the light in the visible spectrum except for a few notches, which are the black bands there, that are rejected. So this is generally where the light pollution sits. And then the opposite side is the narrowband. Here you'll still get some light pollution through, but you'll knock out most of it. And here you block out all of the light except for the couple color channels that the targets we tend to image tend to emit in, those primarily being hydrogen and oxygen. Now, I'll go to the next slide and I'll give you an example of this. So in the upper left is an unprocessed image that is no filter from my house in Denver. And then the upper right image is me attempting to process that image. And you can see some of the dark nebula structure here and here. Is my mouse coming through on this?
Yes.
You can see the mouse? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it takes a second to cover our microphone buttons.
So, don't pay attention too much. This is just me processing an image I knew wasn't going to come out well. But the point is exactly that. It wasn't going to come out well. In the lower left, I have a wideband attempt from downtown. And then in the lower right is my narrowband image. And all of that is the same amount of exposure time. And you can see that the differences are quite stark. And I'll do a dad brag here. The image in the lower right, I showed my daughter how to process, and she knocked that out in 1 hour. So anybody who thinks that astrophotography is not for them and it's too advanced, once you get someone who can teach you the tools, you can get a process down pretty lickety-split. All right, so on to the discussion of the alternative to using filters. Why buy land when you can rent a pier? And that's a great question. For me, you have different use cases, right? If you want to actually use the land and own land, then there's a use case there. But if you're trying to get the darkest skies you can, and you're willing to spend a little bit more over time, then and have access to it any night you want that's clear, renting a pier is a very good option to go with. So I wouldn't say that it's one versus the other. It's just a question of what do you want to get out of it? What are your goals? The image in the upper left is and Eric hates this image, I'm sure. This is the Rosette Nebula in LRGB SHO, so plus IR, so 8 color channels taken from downtown Denver, and then mixing that with an artistic rendition. Taken the eclipse image that I captured at both the beginning and the end of the eclipse, and then extracted the stars out of the center of the Rosette Nebula and imposed the eclipse image. And I think that'll make a pretty good album cover one day.
No, Dan, I really like that image.
Thanks. Just give me a hard time.
It doesn't offend my sensibilities.
The main image you have here is the image of the land. This is the Dos Cabezas Mountains area. It's near the Semper Tenebris property, and it's just very picturesque, if I do say so myself. So on the renting someone else's dark sky site, a remote host observatory, right? We've got plenty of vendors out there. Not trying to plug any of them, but here they are, the ones that I was able to throw up in 20 minutes, grabbing a slide together. And the prices range anywhere from $150, $200 to up towards $1,000. I think the median's right around $800. And so keep in mind, if you're going to do this for a year at $800 a month, it's on the order of $10,000. So keep that number in the back of your mind. It's $10,000 a year. The other option I would offer you, and this is really the where to start, in my opinion. Why buy and DIY when you can use an astronomical society's land? I am a lifetime member of both the Colorado Springs Astronomical Society, and I'm a member of the Denver Astronomical Society. And absolutely, you should take advantage of this. And I think there was a discussion about the intro of doing this. But there's a talk coming up in a few weeks maybe about this, using the dark sky sites that astrophotography or that astronomical societies typically own. I know Albuquerque has one. I know Dayton, Ohio has one, Denver and Colorado Springs, and those are just the places I've lived, and they've all had one. There are usually monthly star parties. I know the one in Colorado Springs, they do an annual star party that I'll plug here in the next slide. And it's really inexpensive, and you can learn a lot about what you want. And as long as you're not too annoyed by strangers walking around with their flashlights, blinding your night vision every now and then, it's got some serious advantages. Highly recommend it. And to that point, the Rocky Mountain Star Stare is coming up in June of 2025. So we're about, 9 months away now. And we just had it a few months ago. It was awesome. It always is. Usually sells out. So there you go. There's my plug for that one. Another alternative is to launch your telescope on a rocket into space. So governments do this, obviously. Think James Webb and Hubble Space Telescope. If you are serious about doing this as an amateur, it actually could be done for a little over maybe a couple $100,000. You can take it's called a CubeSat, something about the size of a bread box, and you can buy space on a rocket. I don't expect anyone's actually going to do that. It's usually universities and companies will do that type of thing. And this is my favorite part of the video. See stage 1 reentry. There's actually a video of I'm not sure what rocket it was. It was either an Antares or a Soyuz ISS resupply mission. But there you go. You get out of the atmosphere, right? So that big fuzzy ball right there, that's the atmosphere, obviously. And then you can get outside of the atmospheric seeing and all the clouds and all the other issues of light pollution. You know, if you have $1 billion to throw around. Okay, so on to the actual solution that we're here to talk about. So you're thinking about buying land. And I was thinking about this for about 3 years before we finally executed on it. And if it's something you're thinking about doing, you might want to ask yourself, are you a masochist? Do you like rustic camping? Do you want to own vacant, useless land? Do you like working outdoors, particularly in the sun, in the desert, because most of the dark sky land in the country is out in the west. Mine happens to be in the Sonoran Desert. Do you like visual observing? That's a good way to do that. And do you move frequently? But perhaps most of all, you should ask yourself whether you have a strong marital relationship, for those of you who are married. And if so, if you can answer all those in the affirmative, then a dark sky site might be for you. On the plus side, maintenance is minimal, and you have unlimited availability with no blackout dates for access because you own it. And I like to say it's perhaps the best option if you're looking to buy a timeshare. Just buy a piece of vacant land, and the taxes are pretty cheap. So low annual maintenance costs. This image is of the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula regions. 3 hours, same telescope, same camera we discussed before. And just to give you a couple other ideas of some of the results I've gotten, here's another one of the Leo triplets after 8 hours of integration on a 71 millimeter doublet. Now, how I've made this work is by not going it alone. Molly Wakeling, one of the, what would you call yourself, Molly? Would be the arbiter of this?
Co-conspirator.
Co-conspirator. Yeah, so cost sharing with co-investors is a really good idea. But in order to do this, you have to ensure that the parties' values and intent are aligned, because you can potentially run into some conflicts that once you enter in a business transaction, right, your names are both on that deed in perpetuity. So make sure you know who you're getting into business with. Parties should be equally invested, but that's of course up to the individuals. And then high level of trust, time, effort, and money. It's kind of like the old adage in engineering. You can have it fast, cheap, or good. pick 2, right? So we chose to save money in this case and time. So effort is really what we've been expending, and it's been quite a journey. So we've owned it for about 3 years now, and it's been going pretty well. The question, though, before you get to that point is, where do you actually look? What would you want to consider in the trade space? It can be difficult to navigate. So I've just taken a picture, screenshot of the light pollution map that anybody can go to lightpollutionmap.info and find this site, zoom in and look around. And a bunch of different question marks are on the map here. Of the red is bright, so you can see Denver here, and then the dark would be the dark sky or the low Bortle numbers. So Bortle 8, 9 here, and then Bortle 1, 2 out here, and the lower number means darker. So a couple things we considered is proximity to transportation hubs. There is plenty of Bortle 1 land and plenty of Bortle 1 territory or surface area on the Earth, right? All of the ocean surfaces are Bortle 1, but no one goes and does astrophotography there because it's almost impossible to access. So that's kind of like the extreme example, but expense and difficulty to access is a primary consideration. It doesn't matter if you own Bortle 1 land if you never go to it. So proximity to transportation hubs and proximity to support facilities were some of the most important factors for us. Then budget, and with that, price per acre, access to the site, and then looking at what the light pollution is. And as a result, I found you really cannot find inexpensive land less than about 3 hours away from a major transportation hub. In Bortle 1, you've got to go up to about Bortle 2 or 3 to find a reasonable amount of access and really dark skies. So Bortle 2 and Bortle 3 is still incredibly dark. The altitude and lay of the land also matter. The zoning and ordinances, are you able to build on it? Who are your neighbors? What are they like? Definitely going out and going to the land and staying on it, or spending some amount of time when it's dark out there. Maybe take a sky quality meter if you have one, or you can get one, and measure the brightness of the sky is one of those things you want to do. And then I have these purple arrows indicating access to power, access to water, and internet services are lower priorities. If you're going to be out there a couple times a year like us, then we just have a generator that we fire up with a propane tank, and that serves our needs. We don't have to mess with fuel and fuel stable. Just hook up the propane tank, turn it on, and go for the week, and it's $20 for the week for power. It's a lot cheaper than doing electrical hookup and paying connection fees and all that. Access to water, we just cart our water in. And internet service, as far as like fiber, you can get Starlink for $120 now a month, or if you have cell service, you can just hotspot from your phone most likely, and that's what we do out there. Most important question maybe is, once you've gotten the proximity to transportation and support facilities and your budget worked out, is how many acres do you need? And that'll kind of tell you a lot of what you should be looking at. Smaller plots can be harder to come by. People tend to sell their lands in 40-acre plots. The Homestead Act from 12, 20, something like that. Plots were 40 acres, and a lot of the land out there is still 40-acre chunks to this day. So if you find a subdivided acreage, that can be beneficial. And then lastly, be patient and be ready to commit. I'm going to offer a notional example here. So this is Albuquerque off on the left, and here is just some random site out in Aurora, New Mexico. It's a notional site. The proximity to transportation hubs, you got 1 hour and 20 to the airport, and to support facilities, you've got 50 minutes to Santa Rosa there. The budget, unfortunately, there's nothing less than $100,000 in the area. Everyone has the different budgets, but I'm going to call $100,000 expensive for the purposes of this conversation. Access to the site, it's easy. There is a road to that location. And then light pollution, I have this line with these purple arrows, indicates anything past this is going to be down to Bortle 2. So you definitely have dark sky there. This is just something I pulled off of the internet on Zillow. So I don't know anything about all these other factors here, but you know, 3 out of the top 4 priorities, not bad. So this is kind of how I would look at it. Overlaying the Zillow map, you can see these little red dots with the prices. You can overlay the Zillow map and the light pollution map, and then a road map from Google, and see all this information. I have to stitch that together manually, but this is the type of trade space I'm looking at. Here's another notional example out in, where's this, Rachel? In Rachel, Nevada. So if you don't mind hanging out with little green men out there, there is a 2.5 acre plot for $12,500. That's in Bortle 1, about as Bortle 1 gets. And it's $6,000 an acre, 2.5 hours from Las Vegas Airport. The closest support facilities, there's not much in Rachel. I've been past it. There is nothing there. There's an inn. I think it's called the Ailey Inn. And I think one restaurant and a gas station that newly reopened. So not a lot in terms of support facilities. The budget, however, I would, for the purposes of this discussion, say $6,000 an acre is pretty close to what I've seen. And so the budget maybe is affordable. Access to the site, road takes you straight there. Light pollution map, excellent. Altitude, lay of the land is flat. Ordinance and zoning, you can build on it. There are no neighbors. And then access to power and water, not sure about. And then this last thing, what is a Plosser claim? I didn't make another slide on this, but there is a lot of other land out there in the West. And particularly if you're looking for really dark Bortle 1 skies, it's dark because nobody lives there, and nobody lives there because it's generally not sustainable. And that land tends to be federally owned, but that's not to say you can't make use of it. So there are load claims and Plosser claims. These are for mining. And I wouldn't recommend someone necessarily go out and buy a mining claim in order to do astrophotography. But if you want access to Bortle 1 skies for as cheap as you can get, it's kind of tough to beat a Plosser claim. I've found 60 acres for $5,000. You do not own the land, but you have, what you're purchasing is the right to mine material off of its surface. So you can take your RV out there, set up your telescope, and it's going to be some of the best skies you can get in the country. So mileage may vary. I am not a expert in this area, but it is a thing. So it's going to be cheaper than buying the land generally, and you can get darker skies. So, all right. So back to owning the land and the dark sky site that Molly and I own, named Semper Tenebris. It's 9 acres in southeast Arizona, Bortle 2-3. It's at 5,400 feet altitude, and we have electrical overhead lines. No water, though. There is a well, but it is dry. And most importantly, and I'll focus on this quite a bit, there is no driveway. We paid $12,000 for the land and $600 in closing costs. The taxes are $157 a year. There are a total of 4 investors, so that's split 4 ways. And we have about $10,000 of improvements on that land. Each of us are invested at about $6,000 to date. And most of those improvements that we were planning on making have been made at this point. So there isn't really a lot of maintenance. It's just the property tax going forward. So for $40 a year, we own it, and it's just the cost of getting a flight. And I can fly from Denver to Phoenix. I actually am flying out in a couple days. I got a flight for $42. So access can be pretty cheap. Now, you can see in the target there, that's about where the land is. We're 90 minutes away from Tucson, 45 minutes away from Wilcox. So transportation hubs, check. Access, proximity to support facilities. Wilcox is big enough to have one of everything you need. The budget is inexpensive, especially after you split it. We do not have direct access to the site. No driveway means we have to pick everything up and carry it by hand. The light pollution, we're in Bortle 2. I'm going to count that as a check. Altitude, 5,400 feet, check. Lay of the land, it's very terrainy. So it is what it is. Ordinance and zoning, we are allowed to put 2 structures on it, and it is for residential, so I can't start a company on it, but I don't expect we would. The neighbors are nice. Met them a few times. We do have access to power, no water, and we have internet. So there you go. A lot of green checks, a few red checks, but can't have your cake and eat it too, I guess. With that, I'll offer, if there are any questions at this point from the chat or anyone else before we go on to the next slide. And if not,
Hi, Dan.
Hey.
We've been monitoring the questions, and so far they're just listening to you. They may
Sure.
come up with stuff. We encourage people to go ahead and ask their questions over in the chat over there. Okay, so you can go ahead and proceed.
right on.
Dan, I have a question. So how do you arrange for power? Do you have to have the power company and drop a line?
Yeah, if I was going to drop grid power, there is a power line that's about 50 feet from the structure we've built, and I would have to trench and then lay down line, put in a power pole, and if I do the trenching and I have access to the cable and buy the parts myself and just have the power company connect the line in and then pay an electrician to do the hookup, I could probably do it for a few $1,000. If I just pay a guy to do the whole thing for me, it's probably going to be about 5,000 was the last quote I got, but that was pre.
So do you have to put in your own transformer, or is there?
So there's nothing there. It's just the power pole. So I would have to tie into the existing power, and they would have to the power company would have to put the splice into it, and then we would have to have our own breaker box installed on a pedestal.
Okay, thanks.
When you say you don't have a driveway, I assume there's a road that approaches the land.
Yeah. So I have that coming up in a few slides.
Okay.
So
Well, why don't we
I'll
wait
cover
till
that
we get
next slide.
there?
Yeah,
And in the meantime, Larry wants to know if you know where this is in relationship to Dos Cabezas.
Yeah, it is right near it.
Right at Dos Cabezas?
It's right at Dos Cabezas. Yeah.
We can see Dos Cabezas from where we are.
Yeah. We're on the foothills of Dos Cabezas, and fun fact: every time my wife and kids and we drive across the country, there is a natural history museum in Hays, Kansas, and there is a live rattlesnake exhibit there. And I visited a bunch of times. After buying the land, I went through that exhibit probably for the 5th time because we crisscrossed the country quite a bit, and saw that the pygmy rattlesnake, which is apparently the most venomous rattlesnake in the country, is indigenous to the Dos Cabezas Mountains.
So you've got that someplace in your contract with the other 3 about avoiding the pygmy snakes, right?
Yeah. I actually did have there on my local wildlife, but I thought that was getting too into the weeds. But yeah, no, we've only ran into one snake, and we actually even aren't sure what the species it was. But I definitely wear snake garters while I'm out on that land. Snoring desert can it's just maybe not all that different than the outback in that regards. Okay, so what I have on the slide here. Here's my my little Takahashi and my QHY 533 camera that I have in a travel case. And I have another larger Pelican case that I've shown on the show before that I have my telescope mount in. So that is a whole observatory in a box, and then a deployment bag with all my clothes and other accoutrements. We go out twice a year generally, although this year I'm going out for my 4th trip here in a couple days, and we've got something called a Buffalo cart, and it's got a lithium-ion battery and a 500-watt motor, and we just tie down, strap a container, throw a bunch of stuff in, and walk it up, and that's how we get to the land using the driveway. And this is what it looks like from the land. And there are me and my snake garters that are on our fire pit, and we just monitor to see what the fire ban status is of the nearby Chiricahua National Monument, and we follow that. And it's quite enjoyable, I must say. I enjoy going out there every single time. So about this road, yeah, no road access. You can see up here there is a dirt road, and this is the neighbor's gate, and his property goes off this way. Our easement goes north-south along this red arrow, and there is no direct improved access. It is overland, unimproved. So we take the vehicle up to here, park here, and then use the cart to haul down the ravine, up the ravine, down the ravine, up the ravine, onto land, and then we have our structure. And it's about 1,100 feet wide and 350 feet tall, and that's where we put our shed. I just went to Google shed and had it delivered right up to the gate there, and then we had to have a truck. We could not go down the easement here because it's just too terrainy. So we had to drive the truck around into the neighbor's property and get permission to do that. And if you imagine the type of people who live in Southeast Arizona in unpopulated areas that generally don't like to be bothered, so that was a bit of an ask, but we were convincing and we were able to do it. I have a video on it in a minute. So yeah, the little path there, we see that on a regular basis driving in and out. There's a wire gate and a foot trail on this driveway. So we have taken the first year to put a wire gate here and then improve a foot trail to access it without having to traipse through grass and unknown critters and snakes that might be underfoot. So it's a lot less dicey in that regard now with this improved. And then priority 2, so that was priority 1, getting better site access. Priority 2 is figuring out shelters so we could have equipment out there and not have to carry every single ounce of material every single time. So there is a storage shed out there, and life on the Sonoran Desert is difficult without shade. So one of the other primary reasons we wanted to put that. Now I'm going to offer you a quick video here. This is me using our pulley system to get up this ravine, and it is decently steep. You can see on the right side, we've got these rubberized mats that we just put in this year. So little quality of life improvements over time have really made a big difference. And I can move a couple 100 pounds there up that. Then once I get it up that hill, the rest of it's pretty cake to get it down to the location. No, the one on the right is me pulling the thing up the hill, and the one on the left is a heavier load. So I use gravity to my assist on this one, and then I got my cart stuck. So moral of the story, pulleys are awesome. Mechanical advantage is your friend. And thank you, high school physics. Success. All right. So after 3 years, we've learned quite a few things. We have built a 16 by 10 foot storage shed, and we also use that for sleeping shelter, so we don't have to carry out and pitch a tent every single time. The roof does not roll off, so it is not a remote host observatory. It has no power, has no internet, and does not require a permit as a result, which is nice. And you can see in the lower left there, these are all the materials we had to bring out on a Ram 3500 in order to put the thing in place. The image on the right is Bose Galaxy and the integrated Flux Nebula taken from a Nikon DSLR with a normal DSLR lens, no filters, wide open at f2.8, and that's 1 minute subs from 2 nights, and that's just what comes out of a color camera. So I think that's pretty incredible. That's what you get from a dark sky site. I cannot do that from downtown Denver, no question. All right, so let's see, what else is on here? We do have a little bit more air particulates than we initially thought. And so the neighbor's lights, and there's a nearby dairy farm, and this is where we get the /Bortle 3. So it just kind of depends on the circumstances and how much particulates are up. There's some mining operations nearby. But those are the types of things that, unless you're out there multiple times, multiple nights, there is some residual risk even after visiting the land, and it's still pretty freaking immaculate. So no complaints. Let's see. Yeah, we're pretty much there. This is the foundation. The idea was to put 15 blocks down, and then block joists, and then center joist as a foundation, and then we put something called the sandwich on top of it. And we actually built off of these plans. Just had them printed out and took them out there. So we used 3/4 inch pressure treated plywood, and everything was ground contact, pressure treated, rated. So we have basically a framed wall that's got plywood on both the top and the bottom. between the studs, and then insulation in between, because once you put the shed on top and secure it all down, if you didn't insulate it and you needed to, you're really going to regret it, because you can never insulate it once it's built. So we went ahead and insulated precautionarily, and we're really glad we did. It's nice and comfy. So here's a quick video on how to build a shed in the Sonoran Desert in 5 days, and I'm going to switch to that video now. All right, is that showing? Molly, can you confirm the video's up?
The videos, we see the Earth.
All right, great. Here we go. So there's the land, and we've got our truck here. Audio coming through okay? So we had to pitch a tent because we didn't have anywhere to stay. And here, first day, we're just unloading all the stuff. And by first day, I mean, we're already in the afternoon, because we had to go to the hardware store, get all this stuff, wait for the guy to deliver the shed kit, unpack everything off the truck, and then pack the shed kit on the bottom, then pack everything back on top of that in order to get it to go in one load. And you can see our power solution there is in the lower left. We've got 2 tanks of propane and a 4,400 watt generator. Now here you can see these little puffs of dirt popping up every now and then. This is us taking the pickaxe and digging at the Badlands, remnants of the Rocky Mountains in southeast Arizona. So it's just really rocky and hard pack ground. This is actually, we're in day 2 now. So just unpacking everything, I think, was day 1, and now we're working the foundation. Trying to get all these blocks at the same height, dug down and leveled, times 15, and it's kind of like you change one thing and it changes the other thing, and it just takes a lot of iteration to get it all correct. We were pulling off rocks out of the ground that were as big as your chest, and it was just a lot of slinging that pickaxe. It is probably the best tool we've got. We didn't think we were really going to make use of it. We're like, why am I buying this pickaxe? It's so, transcontinental railroad. But no, it is an absolutely indispensable tool. It's the best tool we own. All right, and we got our foundation. Here we go, cracking away. There's some of those rocks I was talking about. And now that was the end of day 2. And I believe this is the beginning of no, this is still, I think, maybe the end of day 2. We're just fastening all of those things together now that we've got them leveled and correct. And then we're going to build the sandwich. So if anybody's done framing, I did framing before in a former life, as did my brother and the other people in the video here. So it's me, my brother, my cousin, my nephew Zachary, and then Molly are the 4 individuals doing the construction here. My brother and I work together. Oh yeah, the horses. Those are the neighbors' horses. They like to be curious and come by. They pay us a visit every time we go out. It's a lunch break or something. Yeah, liquid nail and some, everything was screwed together, no nails in our project here. Trying to get this built to last. All right, lunch is over maybe.
It was like 100 degrees. We had to take a lot of breaks.
Oh yeah, did I mention it was August in the Sonoran Desert? Yeah. All right, so now we're starting to build the first exterior wall, and I think that was the end of day 3, and this is the beginning of day 4. And so you can see the CEX panels are going down on the bottom of the sandwich. And I know it looks like it's on the top, but it's actually going to be flipped over and it's going to be the bottom. So that's going to go, the thing that was standing on in the back right in front of the red tent that I'm screwing all the screws into right now. That guy's going to get flipped over and placed on top of the joist. There we go. And there it goes. Now we're going to put the, lag bolt it all down, put the ice cream in the ice cream sandwich, and then now you know why we call it the sandwich. All right, foundation complete. Yeah, that's the hardest part. Absolutely, if you couldn't tell. And then this is night 3.
So peaceful.
Yeah, you did a really great job.
Thank you. It was warm enough that I took the rainfly off my tent and just sucked under the stars, and it was excellent. It's not too bad.
All right, now we start building walls. And this part was like a huge sigh of relief. Finally, we have shade. After, what, 2.5 years of owning the land, or 2 years at the time, and we had somewhere to get out of the sun. And Molly learned how to square a wall here and do some general framing. And it was just a nice throwback to old times from about 20 years ago. My brother and I were doing that for a living. And it just reminded us how much we are so glad we don't do that for a living anymore. But at the same time, it's, you know, it's just great memories. All right, wall 2 is up, going for wall 3. And then the front is already built. We just gotta put it up. So that goes together pretty quickly here.
So Dan, this is shelter. This is an observatory. So
Correct.
is there an observatory in your future?
So this is a question, right? I mean, if we're gonna put an observatory out there, it's gonna require power, right? So I'm gonna have to put in power, I'm gonna have to put in internet, and I'm not gonna have on-site tech support, right? So comparing again with the remote host observatory, on-site tech support comes with that $800 a month. I don't have on-site tech support. I gotta unplug and plug a USB because that QHY533 is all finicky again. I gotta fly out there.
Well, the other thing is having a road so that we can get cement up there.
Yeah, so we'll have to invest about $30,000 to put a road in.
Yeah,
there's a $30,000 observatory,
blast.
which is before we install any high-quality, reliable equipment. So it is a long way off before we have a remote host observatory, which is why we went through the trouble to do all this so that we could at least make regular and good use of the land.
Do you feel comfortable leaving things out there?
I did until I revealed the approximate location of all of this on the internet tonight.
you can't see the shed until you're like on the property. So most you can't like drive by it and see that it's there. Pretty much the only people who know it's there is our neighbors.
Yeah, and they're Southeast Arizonans, and you don't go on their land without them knowing about it. So,
yeah, these are the kind of people that shoot first and ask questions later. So most people aren't going to be going across other people's property.
that is 100%.
So the plan is to go out multiple times in a year.
Yes, well, we do. We have been going out. I've made 10 trips out to the land. It's difficult though when we're only going out there for a couple of times a year. Yeah, me and my brother. But it's make a lot of progress. So the progress we can make is, how much work can you get done in 4 days in the Arizona heat, right? So it's long and slow progress, but it's progress. Alex, what are you saying?
Let's go back to the introduction to tonight's show, where we talked about if you were to go to one of these places that rent for $800 a month,
yeah,
everything would already be set up. You would be able to use it nominally 365 nights a year. Here, you're able to use it twice for 4 or 5 days at a shot.
Yep. Yep. So I get about 8 imaging nights a year on this land right now.
Yeah.
And so the upfront investment is a fair amount, right? Which is again why I split it 4 ways. So for $6,000 upfront, we've got it to the stage we have it at now. And you'll see at the end of this video, which is coming up here pretty soon, as soon as we got the thing shingled, rain came in. But we have since painted it, and we've got air conditioning, we've got heat, like I said, power. So for the 10 nights a year I can use it, at an upfront investment of $6,000 and $40 a year thereafter, plus the flight to go out there a couple times a year. Going forward, price per night, it's really not even close. But if you want to be able to use it for more than a dozen nights a year, then yeah, the remote host observatory is definitely going to have a certain value proposition, right? That this just won't. Let me go back to that. Okay, and then back to presenting. And of course, I have to go back to the beginning.
We do have a question before we start on the next segment.
Sure.
I'm not sure it's been answered. I don't quite have it in my brain what the answer is yet. Jimmy wants to know, how far are you carrying things all together?
Oh, so it's 1,100 feet from the road to the property line.
What's the elevation rise to you? No?
It changes about 150 feet down the road.
And who owns the land you're walking across?
I do. I own the easement.
Have you investigated making that just a little bit wider so a good 4-wheel can get up and down?
Okay, so let me be clear. When I say I own the easement, it is part of the sale of the property. That access to the property is a legal requirement. So the easement itself is 33 1/3 foot, 3 inches and 1/3 inch wide, according to the deed. Somebody likes threes. And that land is technically the neighbor's land, but it is my right to improve it, to put a fence on it, to put a road on it, and to walk across it. So I could take a 4-wheeler down that easement. Yes, except it has to go through the ravine, and there are big rocks in the way. I'm talking rocks that are like 8 feet tall. And so the reason it would take $30,000 to put in a driveway is that I would have to have a blasting crew come out and get a blasting machine or some dynamite out to those rocks and blow it up so that it could be passable. And those rocks are as wide as the easement. So the foot trail does go off easement, and I have permission from the neighbor to have the foot trail do that. But I also have an agreement that we will not take a wheeled vehicle, motorized wheeled vehicle, down that foot trail where it goes off the easement. So theoretically, yes. In practice, no. And this is one of those big takeaways, right? You want a driveway. Make sure you have access to a driveway. We've made it work, but it has been cumbersome, to say the least. But now where we are, we have a shed. Now we almost have to call it a cabin that sleeps 4 and fits the newest member of the telescope family called Big Gun. This is a 16-inch f4.5 Newtonian that is from Discovery Telescopes. It's about 20 years old, and we bought it from a gentleman, very, very nice couple in Sedona, Arizona. And it has a new life out there in the Sonoran Desert. Yeah, to answer your question, Eric, from earlier, it'll be a long time, if ever, before we put a remote host observatory out there. It would be a separate building. We would not replace the shed or make the shed a roll-off roof. We would place it somewhere else, which means we'd have to level the terrain because we built the shed on pretty much the only level terrain on the property. But until then, really, it's just about having a good time and enjoying company and enjoying dark skies. In 2 days, I'll be flying out there. We have to install a sunshade and do some trail maintenance with what I call the Cindy Lauper and the Sawzalls band, and get rid of some roots. And then after that, we're going to install some reflective insulation on the wall trim in order to improve the thermal efficiencies, and then put up some trim board on the inside to make it look nicer. And just do some visual observing, some hiking, and some wine tasting in town, and dinner at the local Mexican restaurant, which is chef's kiss. But yeah, other than that, doing upgrades for security, putting cameras out there, Starlink, getting tied into the electrical grid with a post. These are the plans. Yeah. Putting in a couple concrete pads and some piers for some telescopes so that we can just put like an Ioptron HEM 44 that I have. I just have the pin in a concrete pillar, and I just drop the mount out there, and I don't have to keep a tripod or anything like that, and I don't have to polar align. But if we're going to do the remote host observatory, it's going to look something like this. Concrete foundation, grid power, 3 rooms, 2 HVAC controlled. One being the equatorial room would not be HVAC controlled. The room, the building would have a partial roll-off roof, so the back half would roll on, there we go. Yeah, the right half would roll over to be on top of the left half, with high-speed internet either through a hotspot, PCS, like MiFi type of device, or Starlink, and then debating between 3 or 4 concrete piers. Although, like we talked about, the lack of road access makes it really difficult. So when you do the math on what's going to cost to do all that, this is where I go back to renting a remote host observatory pier. Starts to look pretty attractive. Either that or buy another piece of land that already has what we're looking for, and I don't need close proximity to travel and resupply if I'm just using it as a remote host observatory, but I have to make the observatory resilient, right? And that can be a really difficult thing to do. So yeah, that's one of the major takeaways, is having system reliability, failure recovery, system security, with no on-site tech support, so it's auto-recoverable. That can be a really difficult thing to engineer. It can be done. It has been done. And Manny Lentz, I think he has his doing all that exactly. So we have friends in the community who can help us if we go down that road. The advantages, though, for us is we own the land. We own it forever, and we use it. So it meets our needs and our use cases. It's not for everybody, to be sure. And when you compare the cost of an annual remote host observatory, Alex, taking your point into account that you're going to get a lot more imaging nights out of a remote host observatory, but for the total investment cost of having access to the dark sky lands, there's definitely a proposition, a value proposition to be made here. All right, so what would I do differently? Be a little more patient, search more, and wait for the right plot. I think we got a very good plot for a very good price. But again, I also go back to, you have to be ready to commit. So spending time on the land before you purchase it is really important. Getting to know the neighbors, and then not having a driveway is difficult. Build a shelter, make sure you have somewhere to put stuff, and keeping heat and AC, because even if you're in there in the shoulder season, you're most likely in the desert, and even the shoulder season, which is when we travel out there, can be difficult weather-wise. Boots and a shovel and toilet paper, always. Pawn shops have good, cheap power tools. Don't take my word on it, go check it out. Join an astronomy club and use their dark sky sites. Learn whether something like this might be for you, acknowledging that I'm talking to a very small market share. And the last thing is water, 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 water. All right, with that, I think that's all I've got to talk about. So I'll entertain any other questions you might have. And there's a picture of the Wizard Nebula and a picture of the Milky Way with Andromeda in the upper right, taken from the land.
I do have a question about the that last couple of slides. You showed the notional idea of what you're going to do in the future, and those were walls around there. So when you roll that roof closed, you've got a closed building. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Because earlier you were talking about making pads, and
so that's a different effort. Just putting pads out in the dirt. Right in
pads
the inner before we build a roll-off or roof observatory. Okay. So crawl, walk, run. We finished the crawl. Maybe we're in the walk. So the next stage is getting all the water and the concrete on that cart and that pulley system to put a couple concrete piers, which would be no minor undertaking. And then sometime in the future, like decadal time in the future, building a remote host observatory on yet another location, which would have the remote host completely autonomous roll-off roof.
Dan, you can stop sharing if you'd like.
Great.
And I have a question about your sandwich. Your sandwich is sitting on a set of concrete cinder blocks, right?
Deck blocks, yes. So the sandwich is on top of joists. The joists are into the deck blocks.
Well, you've got plywood underneath the joists and on top of the joists?
I've got plywood on top of the joists, and it's underneath the 2x4s, which act as the insulated floor. So there's the joists, which are the foundation, and then there's the floor. In order to keep the insulation from falling out of the bottom and from critters getting up in it.
Okay, so there's no ceiling on the bottom of the joists.
So the pressure treated plywood on the bottom is the ceiling of the joists. Does that make sense?
It's not computing in my head.
Right,
if I were somehow to get underneath your building and look up, what would I see?
Plywood.
Plywood. And above the plywood be a set of joists.
Yeah.
And above the joist would be a set of plywood, a floor of plywood. Okay. Correct. Okay, that's what I thought we had going. Now, let me go back to that whole package of plywood, insulation, and joists, plywood is sitting on top of cinder blocks, right?
So it's deck block.
What's a deck block?
And you've got 2x6 joists, then plywood, then 2x4 joists with the insulation, and then plywood on top of that.
Oh, okay. So the sandwich itself is 2x4s.
Right. The sandwich itself sits on top of the joist, the 2x6 joists. Or the 2x8, maybe.
What are you going to do when animals get underneath the house?
Yeah, so there are already animals under the house. I mean, they live there.
And you're not worried about the problems they can cause.
It's not much I can do about it. I'm only there twice a year, which is part of the reason I have the plywood on the bottom, so they're not getting into the insulation.
Okay. I've played with the desert a lot in my life, so.
Yeah, well, if you have any recommendations on what we could do better, I'm all
you're like you said, just keep up on it. Don't let them get ahead of it all.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so we've got a lot of burrowers out there, right? So even if I put like chicken wire down there, it's still gonna get around it.
Yeah, they know their way around.
Yeah.
So what kind of critters do you get?
Mice, field mice, a lot of field mice. There's some snakes out there too. And
the snakes can take care of the mice, right?
Yeah. Right, circle of life, right? Yeah.
So you should hire some snakes and cultivate them and just.
Yeah, you don't have to pay them much either.
If you want some small snakes, I hear they got some really good pygmy snakes of some kind.
I'm sure I already own quite a few.
Well, that's interesting. It's certainly food for thought. And if you look back in the beginning and the way it actually turned out, you probably think, it didn't quite turn out the way we thought.
Molly and I put a lot of time in engineering the solutions here. I'd say we went into this pretty eyes wide open. The only, I think, surprises really were finding that consistently there is more particulate matter in the air than we expected. But other than that, I wouldn't say we really ran into too many surprises so far. What would you say?
Well, I mean, your scopes aren't out there all the time. It's not like an observatory where it rolls off, so you only take them out when you're there.
Oh yeah, they're inside the shed, right?
Yeah,
the 16-inch lids inside the shed. The 6-inch Newton, my little 80mm Brovska triplet, they all live in the shed.
Yeah, there's not much to. I mean, we built the shed and we moved stuff in and out. Yeah, if and when we do build a roll-off roof observatory out there, we've had a lot of people on this show come on and talk about how to do everything, and then of course there's Terry, who I plan on going to for advice on how to achieve his level of redundancy of systems for safety.
And I go back to for the $30,000 it's going to cost us to put in the road.
Yeah,
we could buy another piece of land.
We're thinking about other options, yeah, because we knew going in that there wasn't a road to it, obviously, but it definitely makes it harder to want to be out there and to get stuff out there and to get the stuff we'd like to have out there. And of course, to build anything else out there.
Perhaps we misunderestimated how difficult it was going to be to move material over that land with that ravine, but now that we have those traction mats down and the footpath trodden and well maintained, it has gotten exponentially simpler and easier labor-wise to move material out there. And now that we have everything we need out there, it's really just taking our clothes, our water, our food, and our telescope gear. And even that, I just take the camera anymore because
we're working on.
I've got a mount. I've got Navy X out there.
Is it possible to put a little campground down by the road? And the only thing that needs to go up would be the observing equipment.
Well, we don't own anything down by the road. We just have the easement, which we can pass on.
You mean down at the end of your access?
Yeah.
So you don't own anything between the road and your setup?
Yeah, I
just
partly misspoke before when I said we own the easement. It is our easement to do with for right of access as we need to, but it is the land technically belongs to the neighbor, right? That's why it's an easement, not part of the property. So we could camp on the easement, I think. I wouldn't though.
Yeah, there wouldn't be a point because the spot where we would want to observe is on the other side on the property anyways.
So if you want to put in a pier, how easy would it be to dig in that?
Not at all. It's impossible. It's practically impossible. Pickaxe and a lot of water. You got to soften up that dirt. Yeah.
So you couldn't put an auger in there; it wouldn't go in.
No, it would just sit there and spin. It's not going to go very far before it runs into a big chunk that it can't get around.
Our neighbor says whenever he needs to dig, he just he pours a lot of water into the ground to soften it up so that he can dig.
Yeah. So that'll actually. I mean, it took an entire day just to put in 15, and we were only digging down like a foot and a half. Not a foot and a half. Yeah, we backfilled with gravel. So it was about 12 inches down or so. The frost line is not very deep down there.
No, it's like 6 inches.
Yeah. When we are putting fence posts in, though, we have to dig down about 2 to 3 feet, and that takes quite a while, quite amount of effort. We're going to be doing that this week. And
on the other hand, if the ground is that stiff, you don't have to dig a pit down there to hold the concrete.
This is what I've considered. The biggest job is going to be transporting the dry concrete, the mixer,
and water, and the water is
a 2-to-1 ratio of water. It's a lot of weight. Yes, it's 2 bags, 3 bags at a time is as much as we could really pull up that hill. So this is sort of like it would take an entire week just to move the material, and then in 6 months we'll come back and actually make the pier.
The water weighs more than the concrete, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that depends on the amount of it moving. But
no, I don't think so.
The concrete's denser, right?
Yeah, water floats on top of concrete.
2.2 ton per square meter.
There you go.
there you go.
Jeez. I'm tired just listening to this.
It's a lot of fun. Honestly, it's a lot of work, but
That's
as
part
we
of the
say
fun.
in my line of work, sometimes you just embrace the suck.
So what about your family? Have they embraced this whole thing as well?
My wife has come around on it. Like I said, you have to have a strong
Uh-oh.
She hasn't been out there yet, though.
She's not actually been out there. We're
What
trying
about-
to work out a time for her to go out that works with her school schedule and the kids' school schedule. It's just, if you're out there during the summer, it's summer.
That's gotta be brutal.
You usually want to be out there. We go out there in March or April or September, October on the shoulder season, and that's during school, so fall break and spring break, but that doesn't necessarily coincide with the new moon, and the kid and the wife's school schedule don't line up. But anyways, the details are the kids really want to get out there. We just haven't worked out the schedules.
And can I ask, how old are your kids?
My daughter just turned 10 and my son is 7.
Oh, so not like teenagers. So
No, not quite.
That'll all come to an end when they're teenagers.
Yeah, well, that 10-year-old might as well be.
Have you experienced the monsoons?
Well, we're usually not out there during the monsoon season. That's usually over the summer. But we have definitely been out there during the rain. It rains probably maybe once every time we're out there, I'd say. Since we're out there in the shoulder season. If you're out there in the wintertime, it's really dry.
So you should put a collection barrel in there.
I have thought about it, but then I've got water for 6 months sitting stagnant. So I would probably use it for working the ground. I probably would not consider.
Yeah, well, right. You collect the water off your roof, put in a large little cistern there, and just that'll be your water for
I'd use it, but I wouldn't drink
drinking.
it.
Right,
I wouldn't drink it.
construction.
So I'd still have to carry drinking water in, which is pretty much all we use water for anyways, generally drinking. What you saw in the video, we didn't use water when we were smacking away the dirt. We were just hitting it with pickaxes and the shovels. Because it uses a lot of water, right? I mean, you need like a big tank of water, and getting it out there is difficult. So,
any more questions that we missed?
No, we're clean. We're good.
Well,
all right.
Dan, thanks very much for coming out. Again, I'm tired out watching, and I'm sure some of our online people are as well. And
You think you're tired now? Should come out.
No, I'm too old for this.
His
Well,
mom's coming out.
She's coming out tomorrow. Come on.
So your mom, take a picture.
I will. Yeah, I kid you not. My mom's hopping on a plane and she's coming out with us. She's super excited.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the air conditioner. So you have a generator to run the air conditioner.
Right. Yeah. There's a 4,400 watt generator that we run on propane, and so we just usually carry one tank out. We have one propane tank for the heater. So when we're out there in the spring, it can get really chilly at night. So we have a safety space heater that runs on propane, and then the generator. So we have those 2 propane tanks to power each, and then 1 spare. So as soon as one runs out, we swap it and then take the empty into town, and we always have 1 full spare. And we'll usually go through a tank when we're out there for the week, and that's $30, $35 for the refill. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all set. Thanks again for coming on. When you get to the next phase, come on back again in a year or 2 and tell us about the roll-off observatory that you're going to build.
A year or 2, you're funny. Yeah, sure. Taking donations now, Eric.
Sorry.
Fundraiser.
So I think we're all set. And who's running the show? Terry, you running the show?
Yeah.
All right, then take us out. And for all you guys who have hung in, and most people have hung in through the whole show. So thanks for hanging in there. Come back next week and learn the exotic ways to handle HORGB images.
All right. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
All right, take care. Good night, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Stay on the line.